Hey there, this is my introduction YouTube video for my channel, The Freedom Formula. And I'd like to start off by saying that this first introduction video is about care, our ability to care. I think is one of the most important things to start with if we want to even talk about the word freedom and have an educated discussion on what freedom can look like. Because if we don't care, we are never going to have freedom. As a society, if we don't care about the people below us, we're not going to look out for their freedoms. And if we don't care about what people are doing above us, we're not going to care about our freedoms either. And then the entire defense for freedoms disappears. It comes from care. And so when we want to live in a free society, one of the most important things that we have to maintain and look after and keep an eye out for is empathy, our ability to care about others and ourselves and our well-being and our homes and our communities and our connection to our roots and just the world itself at large. Like it's really important to care about all these things. And when it comes to the tribal cultures that existed before the colonials, the British Empire, which the sun never set on, came here to Canada, where I'm living today, and defiled the natives who lived here on this planet. I come from a background of being quarter native to Canada and 75% British. And what we see here is that in the tribal cultures around the world and the shamanic cultures, you'd find that they would test their children to see how much empathy they had. It was important to them because people who don't have empathy in the tribe fuck it up for everyone. They'll steal things or lie or cheat, and before you know it, you actually have to get rid of the guy. They didn't have prison cells, they didn't have jails, they didn't want to kill people. Oh, there was no way to control someone else's free will. You didn't have handcuffs. So they would have to check for empathy before they even manifested doing anything wrong in their life. They had to see whether that human being cared. And if they didn't pass the test, do you even care enough about the human species? And then even at the age of 6, I'm like, no. They understood that the first 6 formative years of our life, we're in a hypnagogic state. And that's when these formative years are like the formatting of a hard drive. The information that decides who we are for the rest of our life, what our core values are, what we're really made of, is those first 6 years. And so if a child did not express any empathy after the age of 6, gone from society. And why is that? They would be exiled, and if those people who had been exiled returned, they would be met with hostility. That's because they understood the qualities of a psychopath and how important that is. So when we look at psychopathy, that is the definition of a human being without empathy. And in today's world, there's the understanding of primary psychopathy, which is entirely a genetic issue, and secondary psychopathy. And that has to do with human beings who have, through circumstances and situations, have come to a point in themselves where they no longer experience the empathy that they did before. And I mean, I know in my life I've had experiences that have lessened my experience of empathy, how much that I care. And we all have. I think we would do best to all take a look at ourselves and take note of the experiences in our lives that made us lessen our empathy, because we're about to learn a lesson here. Um, if we do not take care of our own empathy, and we don't start looking at techniques like, for example, emotional freedom technique, developed by Gary Craig. He was a engineer, electrical engineer, so he ended up figuring out how this works from a more um, tried and tested side. Um, these techniques are really important for us to develop, because as a culture we do need to reintegrate empathy into it, because the more we move away from empathy into psychopathy, the more we get situations like what's happening in North Korea, what's happening in China, what happened with the Nazis, and um, these trivial issues that we have that are entirely self-centered and doesn't really come from any place of empathy or care for others in any way in its own reflections of self. Um, we really have to take a good look at ourselves in the mirrors, because those type of issues, those type of behaviors lead to a further enslavement of society. Because in today's society, we're very close to having um, a fascist government, and we don't even know it. And the simplest definition for a fascist government that I've been able to find in an educated sense is the combination of companies, the merger between companies and government. And when that happens, it creates a very complete control structure. The companies are operating through the government, and the government's operating through companies. There's very little room for people at the bottom to have a say in what even happens in their society. And we're already feeling this. How far and distant and removed do we feel from our own leaders who affect our lives, have so much control over our lives, and we barely see any benefits. They see huge benefits from getting into that position, but we hardly see any benefits at all, from one president to the next, one prime minister to the next, one election to the next. Sorry, but how much do you see your life improving? It's mostly determined by things like the banks, and um, heaven forbid they make a new law that impedes your freedom, whether it's weed, alcohol, speech, whatever the next thing is that they come up with, censorship of the internet, being able to grow organic foods. We actually had to fight a bill like that in Canada. Are you kidding me? We actually had to fight a bill coming in saying we couldn't grow organic food in our own backyards. I remember my parents were so upset, and that we even had to deal with this. We're struggling with an internet censorship bill currently that is going to be able to determine our language. And for people who escaped North Korea, they understand that language is one of the most powerful forms of mind control. Not having a word in your language or having a word in your language will determine how you think. Most of your thoughts are organized by the language, in this case, the English language that you're hearing right now. That is the format, the structure, the code, the way in which you operate. As somebody who's learning computer coding right now, I understand that a computer it can't operate outside of a language. If it doesn't know the language, it's not going to have any response. So when you make a new word, you're giving that computer a new way of thinking. And when you delete a word, you're removing a way that that computer can think. And so in North Korea, not having the word for love, not having the word for rape, the closest word you have to love is only that when you're exalting the one who owns you. These terminologies, they can be used politically. For example, we have critical race theory being developed. There's ideologies that are being developed that can cause more separation, more tension, more division, and they only serve to meet the political needs of the few. not the many. It doesn't help with our therapy. It doesn't help with our psychology to feel more divided, to feel like there's more of a problem out there than fixing and healing what's in here. Healing ourselves, caring, and getting to a greater emotional levels of freedom and freedom of thought is going to be one of the most important things for our humanity coming up in the future. Because if we don't have emotional freedom, then we don't have a freedom of expression. If we don't have freedom of expression, we're not going to be able to protect our rights, because our rights only comes from our freedom of expression. And when our freedom of expression diminishes or disappears, so will our rights. Governments are very happy to take them away. They want to take away gun laws in America right now, and that freedom was intentionally put in by the founders to make sure that they could protect themselves from a government that would go fascist and combine itself with corporations. And we live to some degree to a corporatocracy. People like Bill Gates can outright buy countries with the level of wealth that he has today, even just off the vaccines. It's quite insane, actually. We live in a world where somebody like Jeff Bezos, for example, can come up to nearly $1 trillion in wealth, in net wealth. That level of influence over the world by a single person who may not care and show that he does, as we all are starting to do. We really need to pay attention to our level of care. He has enough money to solve every problem. Just think about it. The $1 trillion is an unfathomable amount of wealth. Even $1 billion is hard for most to picture in their mind. Using grains of rice as an example. With that level of money, everyone in the world can be fed every day. Because those people exist, we actually do not have an excuse for world hunger. Letting that sink in is startling. But yeah, coming away from an individual's wealth that they've harvested from the population, we as a humanity have a collective subconscious. And that's determining everything right now. Our collective subconscious is actually determining the level of values of this species, the level of creativity, the level of resources, the level of freedom that we all experience today is a result of our collective subconscious. Our collective conscious is only 5%. Our collective subconscious is 95% of how the world is run. And so anyone who knows this, whether it's through subliminal images, messaging, commercials, programming, indoctrination, school education, they know that if you shape the collective subconscious of the planet, you will get your orchestrated result. And that will determine our level of freedom, that will determine their level of wealth. For the psychopaths. For those who simply do not care. That's the word that defines a psychopath, simply does not care. They don't have any of that. And they can have none of that to such a degree that it will throw you off balance sometimes to see what they're able to do, what harm they're able to inflict on others while pretending to care. Well, I believe I've made my first point about care and how important it is. We can get more into that in the future. I hope to make a lot more videos to engage in that conversation, see what's happening in the comments. I'd really love to see how people can expand on these ideas and help grow an educated and interesting conversation about how we can get to a place of greater freedom for the entirety of the globe, understanding that our subconscious really decides whether we feel that we have energy today or what decisions we're going to make next, what we even care about. So looking at the human being from a holistic sense and how that affects the whole. Um, I'd also like to make the rest of these videos on the channel to support in the development of understanding that not everything that we're taught from the institutions of indoctrination that we call school is correct or accurate. From the shape of an atom and its orbiting electrons, we know they don't orbit like planets. We've known that for a long time now. They're fields. They're fields of electrical pulsation, and they should be looked at as such. We shouldn't ever be shown something that looks like orbiting planets around an atom ever again. It's just diagrammatically, it's incorrect. From the creation of the pyramids and how perfectly they were designed, over 13 acres of base to the top point being only a quarter inch off center. To any of my friends in construction who knows how difficult it would be to do that with stone, I applaud you. It's fantastic. I know from my history in working in trades that if I was even cutting with a saw, with wood, even just like something like a 16th off, something that seems harmless in the realms of construction when building a house, you would never get anywhere near being only a quarter inch off when you're developing stones that fit so close together that you can't fit a cigarette paper in between them over a 13-acre base. It's insane. And then being taught theories as if they're some kind of absolute truth. We take a lot of things for granted when we come out of the indoctrination school system. We hardly know whether we live in a hologram or not. School is not going to address that. We understand the speed of light could be the processing speed of this universe. We understand that the tiniest resolution of the picture of this universe could be half a Planck in size, which is getting into what makes up atoms. And we have yet to even truly nail these things down. So we shouldn't underestimate having everyone brought up with a certain worldview rather than everyone going and searching for truth themselves. We shouldn't underestimate people's ability to go and research and educate others and have an excellent discussion or conversation. So I definitely advocate for homeschooling and educating others as we go forward into the future. Thank you. I hope my videos will continue to be informative and generate a good discussion. I hope you have a great day.